Hold short, hold still. The night shift in the tower is a habit stitched from coffee and the low insect hum of radios that never admit they are tired. When the elevator is up for maintenance, which is most nights, I climb the inside stairs with my thermos thumping against my hip and my knuckles brushing the cool rail. The stairwell smells like old rain and warm dust and the faint sweet of stale jelly from the vending machine downstairs. At the top, the door S closer breathes and lets me in like a parent who has learned not to ask questions at midnight. We call it graveyard, though there is not a grave for miles, only soy fields and a strip of river that remembers what it used to be before men asked it to line up. The airport is small, regional, built to make it look like the county means business even when there isn't much of it. Day shift handles training flights and the occasional medevac or a commuter hop to a city that still wants to be called a hub. Night is for runway inspection trucks, deer that forget fences, and the feeling that radio etiquette might be a kind of prayer. I hang my jacket on the back of the swivel chair that complains even when you are gentle with it. The tower room holds the heat from day like a thermos nobody rinsed. The panorama is glass that clicks in its clips when the wind tries a new angle. Below, the runway edge lights lie quiet, the color of bottle glass, waiting on my hand. The Pappy unit squats by the left side like a row of domestic teeth. The strip printer naps under its little awning, paper rolled fat and pink, ready to be written on by whoever decides to speak first. You smell the coffee before you taste it. Tin and steam, the ghost of something roasted what feels like too far. The fax machine, the one nobody admits we still rely on, sits square and sullen on a table by the window. A small fan has learned to live at 3/4 of a hum so the room doesn't feel haunted by itself. I do the check-in ritual because ritual makes difficult things ordinary. Logbook open to tonight's page, weather, winds, altimeter, runway lights test. 2 clicks, then 3, stepping the edges up 1 notch at a time, the field blushing obediently under the glass. Local and ground and approach frequencies, volumes just shy of obtrusive, squelch set for the voice of someone who might need something. The recorder's red eye winks to let the county know later that we spoke in sentences and did our part. Past midnight, the field goes to that particular quiet a metal building has when it knows the heat is leaving it. The small compressor down by the maintenance shed kicks and rests, kicks and rests. A distant siren tests a note and gives it back. Faint as a thought, you decide to let go. You can hear the river if you hold your breath and pretend you are a kid again crouched under a wooden bridge, listening to a current that announces itself without ever giving away its speed. I straighten the stack of old strips that live under the binder clip labeled archive, because straightening things is the next best thing to control. There's a satisfaction in the click when the metal jaw opens and shuts. I lay a fresh strip on the holder for no reason other than optimism. The strip printer sleeps until it doesn't. When it wakes with heat. A pink tongue of paper slides out, corners warm. I put my hand over it like a person checking a child's forehead. The block letters cut into the paper look the same as they do every day. Black ink, businesslike, aircraft identification. A tail number that isn't familiar, route filed none, category IFR. In remarks, where SID and star codes usually perch like spare punctuation, a single line stamped in capitals, as plain as a manual page. Do not greet. The hand finds the headset without meaning to. Habit says you ask approach if they tagged anything. Habit says you check the FDIO for a plan. Habit says you glance at the scope, even though we don't own radar, not really. We watch a repeater scope that gives us a picture of what the big boys miles east see after their stream of numbers makes a story. The scope shows wind farms, their arms dark and polite, and the river laid out like a wire, and a sky as empty as a room where someone just finished a speech. I do the things anyway. The FDIO gives back nothing. Approach is quiet, except for a shy side tone once, the radio clearing its throat. The strip heater tingles under my fingertips like there's a second hand there under the plastic, palm matched to palm through a door. I turn my head and look straight out at the runway again, the way you glance back into a room you're sure you left nothing in. Without my switch, the edge lights step up one level. It isn't subtle. It's the difference between a person who hasn't decided to speak and a person who has. I wait the way you wait when you've already made the sound you make to start a phone call and haven't it said hello yet. The puppy shows 4 white for a beat. Wrong. Then corrects itself to red over white, coaching an approach nobody made. The second strip slides from the printer with the patience of a thing fulfilling its function. Cleared ILS runway. 13. Maintain 3000, it says. The letters don't care if there's a mouth behind them. On the scope, because I am still looking even though looking has no contract with outcome. A data block glows where the river runs out past the rail bridge. No primary target. Just a square of numbers walking polite down the screen. Ground speed and altitude that make a fine pair until the ground speed stops and the altitude stops and the square takes centerline and sits on it like a dog told to stay. The bay, I call it that though it's only the ribbon of water that used to feed a better town, cools in a way you can feel through glass. A hair on my forearm stands in its little pulse. I lay my palm on the runway light knob and feel matched warmth through metal, the face you'd find if you pressed your hand to a mirror and someone decided you were worth meeting halfway. Downfield, the threshold sequenced once, the strobes telling a story just once, like faraway applause that isn't for you. It would be easy to talk. A controller's first friend is a phrase you don't have to invent. But the strip says a thing, and the strip is the job. Do not greet. The words are workmanlike. They aren't threat, they aren't tender. They feel the way the flight data prints when the power hiccups, a little underfed, as if the machine got cold while writing. Tower. Say again, clearance? Nobody says. The recorder ticks anyway. Timestamps are promises more than they are clocks. I picture the tape spooling in its case, documenting a conversation between quiet and intent. The runway lights ease back of their own will, down a step like a man sitting after deciding to sit. The data block on the screen acquires a tag that I've never seen. Here, served before it thins and slides toward the river and then fades in the polite way old screens fade when they don't want you to feel abandoned. I slide the new strip under the archive clip and feel silly for how gently I do it, as if paper bruises. The pink cools under my thumb. Out across the glass, the field returns to its usual posture, which is to say it looks like a thing we built for better days that have not yet arrived. I say nothing. I am a person who can say nothing when asked politely. I sip coffee that tastes like pennies and smoke. The printer sleeps. There are instructions for nights like this. I wrote some of them years ago before my sister moved north and my marriage learned how not to. They hang in a binder with tabs, written in a script I recognize because it tries to be neater than it is. If the lights advance without command, reset breakers. If ghost targets appear on scope, verify with approach and record. If non-standard messages appear on strips, contact the supervisor. There are 3 extension numbers for phone trees that have grown in too much shade. I call one. It rings against a voicemail full of apology. I call another and get a fast busy that sounds like a thin laugh. I write that down because writing makes a thing behave long enough to be looked at. By 2, the only traffic is a pickup on the perimeter road, its amber light revolving. The sound of its tires a fine hiss like someone letting air out of a mattress. The driver pauses to watch a fox decide about the fence. They both decide against it. The fox disappears into night like it was never a thought anyone had. The truck carries on, checking for deer eyes, for beer cans that will be called foreign object damage if they make it onto the concrete. The county has been moving money from the airport into flood mitigation down by the trailer park ever since last spring leaned on us. That left us short on overtime. A schedule posted by facilities says the elevator will be down for 3 more weeks while they wait for a part whose name sounds like a plumbing injury. We do not complain because complaining requires the belief that someone has the power to change a thing, and that belief is expensive on nights like these. By 3, say it in words because there's no solace in numerals when things want you to pretend they are clean. I find the tower's peculiar drowse. It lives in the difference between the way the radios hum and the way the glass holds cold. My eyelids learn the weight of what they're for. If sleep is coming, it announces itself by making the sound of the coffee maker louder than it is. The strip printer shifts its weight and wakes. The tag that arrives smells like warm plastic. The tail number is a guess. The airline code belongs to a carrier my father once watched on a Saturday morning from the fence line, a name painted in colors that made him proud even when the plane did not stop here. The remarks field gives me the runway and the altitude and no names. The clearance prints as clean as if someone had spoken. I touch the words and feel a heat that insists on being called warmth, because the difference is important to me. I hold the second headset, the one we keep for maintenance. It knows the shape of hands that don't sit well with radios. I consider keying the mic and saying only the name of the field, the old habit, like an introduction at a potluck. The strip on the holder, "Do not greet," sits on the lip of my thoughts the way a coin sits when you're redeciding whether to feed a meter that hasn't complained. A voice on approach coughs and remembers how air works. "Tower, you awake?" "Awake," I say, and the word makes a small dent in the room. "You got any iron in the sky?" "Nope. You?" I look at the scope. The river glows softly where the repeater likes it. The square data block appears, farther out this time, like a man who wants the first hello to be yours. It walks in slow, ground speed and other numbers the scope wants to talk about until it pauses on centerline. "Negative," I say. "We're good." "You hear that squeal on the backup?" Approach asks, because Approach knows how small our menu is. "Nothing here," I tell him. There's a pause, not long enough to be humiliating. "Okay," he says, like we've completed a form. I don't mention the strips. I don't mention the hand warmth through the metal. He doesn't mention his own silence. Men doing jobs at night can only trade so much truth before the work itself starts to wobble. The lights put themselves up a notch with the lazy assurance of a human finger finishing a turn. The puppy winks and settles into its correct coach. The strip printer shakes its head a little and produces a single line in that stubborn black, "Hold short." No call sign, no human flourish, just the rule. I hold short. My mouth holds with me. The recorder marks the holding. Somewhere inside a box in the rack, a little spooling angle of tape is making a sound like a tiny someone applauding at the wrong concert. By dawn, the east glass remembers how to hint blue. The soy fields take color, the way some people take compliments. Slowly, suspicious. The elevator coughs up one man from facilities who looks up at me through the hatch and says a morning that cannot be misheard, and then stays below because the elevator did its part and he does not want to be accused of using the stairs for sport. I finish a log entry that reads like a lullaby. No movement, lights tested, perimeter vehicle, strip printer maintenance due. I clip the odd ones into archive because the word means somebody will look later and read a story into it. In the break room, my thermos gives a cluck when I twist it open. The sound a throat makes deciding to be cleared. The fridge hums too bright, as if it has been practicing all night and is showing off. The gum by the register tape leaves is a color found nowhere in nature and tastes like it dreams of mint without ever having met it. I eat half a donut with sugar hard as sand on it and leave the other half on a napkin that will be thrown away by the next person to need the space. At home, after the drive along the two-lane where wind farm lights wink like a patient teacher, I wash my hands too long for a person who didn't do anything and stand under water that smells faintly like old copper. The apartment S fridge clicks on in the way of a thing that wants you to know it will keep you alive. The mug I leave on the table holds a circle I could date a week by. My sister used to call mornings like this recovery, as if sleep were an injury a person could rehabilitate by daylight and toast. I have the radio on low because quiet makes a person boastful in their own head. I sleep when daylight is 3 steps into being, and I dream a dream they've warned me about in safety briefings, where you handle a sky with no mouth and a plane with no tongue, and you say the right words and then watch them slide off the glass like rain. When I wake, the cat in the building across the way is sunning itself in the only square of light on its porch. I eat an apple that knew a better season. The voicemail light on my cell blinks with the patience of a signal left at the roadside for a person who forgot to return for it. The message is from a man who used to be my boss and now supervises from a county farther east. He uses my name and says, "You're on overnights again. Be careful with that printer. They hang up sometimes when the line's dirty. We're getting some noise across sectors. It's probably the wind." He laughs once, not for the joke, but so I will know he knows laughing is part of it. Also, heads up, doing some NOTAM work. Expect a complaint about the lights from City Council. Someone in a house by the approach says they are getting stepped without reason. Just log anything odd. You're good at that. He hangs up, and I hold the phone and listen to the hiss that follows like a breath that hasn't decided whether it wants to be words. The second night, I climb the stairwell again because the elevator S light blinks in a way that says it would rather be left alone. My joints object in a language you learn to call fond. The tower room smells like old coffee and a touch of printer plastic warmed. The window glass shows my face the way a river shows sky. The radios do their soft chores. I open the log. I make the 2 clicks for runway lights and then the 3, and they obey exactly when asked. When I sit, the chair shrugs under me as if apologizing for yesterday's bad attitude. The strip printer holds its breath and then breathes out 1 tag. The tail number is the same part that made me think of my father, but the middle digits are bent in a way that suggests time passed. Since last, the paint was noticed. The remarks line holds no human code, only runway and altitude, and a routing that looks like a pilot filed direct between a place he can leave and a place he never meant to arrive. In the margin, where nobody writes anything, there's the faintest frosting of black, like the ribbon struck out a word and changed its mind. On the scope, the river brightens at the edge of the repeater. A square appears west, then pauses as if listening. It does not call. It waits until the runway lights step without me and then begins its walk. The walk does not announce its speed. The numbers say one thing and the feeling says another, and if you've ever watched a person you love make the same mistake twice, you know how that difference works. The papy gives 3 white, 1 red, and then repentant red over white, like a man who catches himself in a tone and starts over. The threshold strobe tests and rests. My palm on the light knob meets that matched warmth again, and the thought enters me, easy as breath. Someone else is at their post too. In the break room, the fridge creaks as the ice maker gives up on pretending to be part of a noble cause. I pull off a paper towel and turn the tap on low. The water has that elastic cold, like it has been wound and is unspooling. I think of the river and how many towns it has to hate on its way through, and I let myself imagine for a moment a mouth small as a drain the river could whisper into when it wants the modest miracle of being heard. Back at the scope, the square comes to centerline and waits. The strip in the holder tells me to clear for the approach ID. Never deny this field on a proper night. I say nothing. The recorder writes without complaint. The square steps forward a hair's width, then a hair, and then stops. On the field below, something changes in the way the runway edge lights make color on concrete. It's not brighter, it's not darker. It is the feeling a room has when the door is cracked and you haven't looked to see who is there. Approach comes on, their voice a little hoarse, like they've been eating pretzels from a large tub, because it is night and there is nothing else that tastes like anything. You seeing this? Seeing a picture, I say. Copy picture, Approach says, and we both let the words mean what they want. He adds, council called. They want to know who's paying the power. I told them to invoice the weather. His chair squeaks through the carrier in a way I can see without eyes. You good? Always, I tell him, and it isn't a lie so much as a superstition. The printer produces its neat absurdity on schedule, and I slide the new tag under the archive clip. I should call my boss. I should log more words than I'm writing. Instead, I do the small things that make sense to my hands. A dust wipe on the scope, AS edge. The turn of a cup, so the handle points the right way, the adjustment of a radio knob I do not plan to touch. The tower room watches me do these things, and neither helps nor laughs. You can hear a far train if the wind takes pity. The horn floats across soy and river and runway with the kind of confidence only a machine on rails can own. It is a bright, boyish sound when it is near. When it comes from a distance, it turns thin and thoughtful. Tonight, it has the thinness. It carries a note I like to think is for me, though I know better. There is no comfort in being singled out by that, and there is less in not being singled out. When the square fades, it does it with the same manners as last night. No fuss, no stampede of numbers, just the sense that the room has inhaled and then exhaled you. The lights take their step down. Out on the tarmac, the sand that always lives at the edge of things shifts enough to make a whisper. Below the window, the beacon rotates with the patience of an animal at the end of its rope. The printer sleeps. When it starts again, it spits only a test line, the name of the field in letters fat and sure, the way a person writes their own name with more care than a stranger's. I tear it, because that's what you do when a machine shows you it still has a personality. I think of throwing it away and then slide it into the clip, because there are not many chances in a life to be your own archivist, and it is a shame to waste one. When the supervisor calls, he uses his morning voice, though it's dark where he is too. You seeing the reports about lights, he says. Keep them low if you can. Budget isn't saying the word curtail, but they're putting it in the tone. Copy, I say, because there are only so many grammars. And, he adds, because he is a man who can't leave a single thread untouched. I was going through the old stuff. We used to have an airline with that code you saw. Loved our field. Dropped in for diversions when the city smiled at lightning. Haven't seen them in a timetable in a decade. Miss them? I ask. Miss is too fancy, he says. You get used to things that prove you exist. You still got the old strips? In a box under somebody's new desk, he says, and his laugh catches on something in his throat. You know how it is. When I hang up, I realize my hand is cold. The light knob is cool, the matched warmth is gone or waiting elsewhere, or patient in a way I haven't earned yet. I wrap both hands around my coffee and let the mug tell my palms a plausible story. Down by the perimeter road, the fox tries the fence again and remembers a gap a rabbit could find and a fox could not. It shrugs in the way animals do and leaves without looking offended. The third night, the air feels different before the door closes behind me. There's a dry note in it, like the tower's lungs have seared themselves on their own winter breath. The chair complains, and then seems to listen to its own complaint for a change. The lights do not need my clicks. They are up, not high, but set like a table that expects a guest. I say the checklist to myself and mark what I am doing with a pencil whose eraser has chewed itself to a pink bell. The sound of graphite on paper is small and clean. I'm a man who believes in the click of a binder ring. I believe in ink that proves a thing happened. I'm not yet a man who believes that not greeting is a form of greeting more honest than any hello. The strip that arrives is warmer than the others. The black looks a shade deeper. I put my finger at the top edge and drag it down slowly, as if smearing the letters would cause a word to confess. Nothing smears. The tail number is the same shy friend. The routing that always says between nowhere and here says between nowhere and here better than it did yesterday. The little frosting along the margin looks like the machine had to clear its throat before saying the sentence. On the scope, the square blooms over the river with a confident slowness that seems almost tender. It steps in, writes its numbers, pauses at centerline. The room cools around me the way a porch does when rain hasn't yet arrived but has decided to. The knob for the runway lights is just metal. The hand that used to be on the other side of the mirror has left no heat signature, as if that person has learned to wait politely without touching. Approach, I say before I remember the strip. This is tower. You copy. I let go of the key before a word leaves me. I look at the strip. Do not greet. The phrase is work without ornament. It is the kind of line you find in an old manual with a coffee ring sealing it into wisdom. I rest my thumb on the rim of the printer. It hums, pleased at having been asked for anything. A voice that isn't approach tries the emergency frequency and stops. There is a sandpapery thrill to it, like you get putting your teeth on foil for the single instant before your body remembers that was a bad idea. I keep my own frequency clean. My hand wants to find the second headset to do the twin listen a man does when he's decided to feel useful, and I tell it no. At the edge of the riverside wind farm, the red lights blink with the discipline a night crew learns all at once. In my head, I have the thought that every red blink is a small voice saying stop, and that the field hears it and chooses something else. I do not tell anyone that thought. I am a person who likes his job. The square moves when the threshold sequencer runs a single chain like someone practicing applause. It eases to the numbers painted on concrete that look white in daylight and look like memory at night. It pauses as if deciding whether to roll, and the papi shines honest. In the room behind me, the fridge in the break nook clicks like a person turning a lamp's chain, then decides against it. The gum in the jar by the register tape has lost its candy smell and smells like gum. I put the new strip under the archive clip and breathe once. A sound so small it does not break the tower SS idea of itself. The recorder ticks the way a good dog counts guard duty. I hold very still and forget to look at my watch, which is a relief. The square fades. The lights take their bow. Across soy and field, a porch lamp turns on because a person decided it was time. The river pushes on, nowhere in sight, visible in what it makes of the air. When I leave, the stairwell holds a warmer breath than when I came. My palm prints shiny on the rail. Halfway down, there is the smell you get off dust that has chosen to fall in love with heat. In the lobby below, a rectangular light above the elevator blinks once like an apology and then holds steady. A woman from janitorial wipes the front door glass with a rag that makes a cloudy circle before it turns clear. We nod to each other. In the parking lot, my car is dusted with a film that leaves my fingertips sticky with metal when I draw a line on the hood. At home, the fridge hums, then tries a different note, then returns to the original as if embarrassed. My apartment looks like what you get when you live alone and make peace with it. The mug on the counter holds the ghost of a ring where coffee once lived and is now a geography lesson. The radio in my kitchen tries to be serious about weather and fails by sounding like a person who has never seen weather but believes in it. I dream a dream of stairs that go 3 steps up and 2 down and never deliver you to a door that wants you. In the dream, a strip of paper warms my palm and I fold it into a shape and unfold it, and it is a strip again, and that is almost a comfort. The next shift begins with a voice on the phone that wants to be helpful. "We've got maintenance on a line between radar centers," he says. You may see wobbles on the repeater. Don't take it personal. He pauses for the laugh he's earned and then decides he doesn't want it. Also, City Council is asking who is stepping the lights at night. They want it on record that it isn't them. If it's you, say so. If it's not, don't. Paperwork is incoming. Copy, I say. Paperwork has a smell to it like the inside of an envelope when a thumb tears it open. It isn't a bad smell. It is just the smell of a job that wants to be a job about safety and has become a job about blame. I climb the stairs. I put the coffee on the sill where it can watch me. I say the checklist. The room says nothing back. I think of my father and the fence line and names painted on tails and the way he would say those names like he was getting a story started. I think of my sister in a northern city where the rivers have to be told when to freeze and when to let go. The strip printer does not care what I think, it prints. The tag is warm, more than warm, the heat of a palm pressed through metal. The letters are so crisp they look embossed though they aren't. The code belongs to a creature the county tax office would call a corpse. The routing says the runway. The altitude says 3,000 when I would rather it say 2, because 3 feels like the place in a story where you add a beat for drama, which I do not enjoy at work. On the scope, the square blooms as if I requested it politely. It walks as if learning how to walk in our particular room. It settles. The strip tells me what to do and what not to do. The radio hums in its patient insect way. The puppy holds red over white as if grateful someone in this county still knows how to take direction. It is at about this point, on nights 4 and 5 and 6, that I stop pretending the square is a friend and stop pretending it is an enemy too. It isn't either. It is a task the way dragging a hose down a cul-de-sac is a task. It is the sound a grocery scanner makes when it reads a barcode. That righteous little beep that says one more thing has moved from one inventory to another. I do not think about what inventory because thinking is a choice, and sometimes you are allowed to pick a smaller one. On the 7th night, nights have begun to be counted not by days but by small differences. The strip coughs out before I've hung my jacket. The tag smells hot, not warm. The margin has that frosting again, the ribbon's throat clearing. The remarks box is not blank. There is a single word squeezed into the space like a lesson taught by someone who doesn't want to be known for teaching. Archive. The letters look like all the other letters. They read like a hand you know but can't quite place. The radio is mouth dry. I rub my thumb along the light knob and feel nothing from the other side of the mirror, and suddenly I miss the heat like a hand misses weight it learned to carry. The square on the scope comes in. It stops. The lights do what they do. Everything behaves and nothing behaves, and my hands make check marks in the log, like men in jobs do, when the truth is not a form you would hand to a person you say good morning to. The laptop on the desk. They issued them for notum entry, and then forgot we are men and women who like pens. Shows an email from the county alert office about a planned exercise at the river bridge. There will be a closure, it says, and a siren and a backup siren to be tested for redundancy. Do not call this a drill in public. Public does not like drill. There is a picture attached of the bridge with the river below it, practicing the shape of a larger river. The oven at the diner down the hill must have been cleaned today. The tower fills with that faint, harsh sparkle of chemical lemon. The maintenance shed's compressor says it's say. The perimeter truck passes and honks a tiny honk a man makes when he is alone, but wants to prove sound exists. I put the new strip where its friends go, under the clip that gives paper the dignity of sequence. I look out over the glass and see the runway not as concrete, but as an old habit. Down the centerline, a small bat zigzags, as if a cloud of bugs has decided to give it a dance. The fields beyond weigh themselves under the weight of nothing in particular. The wind farm lights sign and sign, red at their own intervals. The square on the scope is gone. The room holds its breath for a small time and then sets it down on my shoulder the way a tired person will if you let them. I do not greet. I put my hand on the metal and let its temperature tell me a fact that doesn't to change. I wait until the printer sleeps. I write the words that make the night sound lived. When the fox tries the fence, I am ready to be proud of it if it chooses not to be hurt by what it cannot have. When I leave, there's a grit under my shoe, like the powder that drifts from a very old book when you turn to the right page. At home, the fridge hums with new vigor, then stumbles and catches. The mug on the counter has a pale ring that remembers yesterday. Coffee, like a healed cut, remembers the handle of a tool. I sleep and dream and don tea dream and wake to a voicemail from the man farther east. He says the phrase community concern twice, as if once was not enough to satisfy a county board, and asks me to send copies of any odd strips and not to email photographs, because that breaks a rule. He wants them physically mailed in an envelope, like it is a decade that still owns paper. I slide strips into an envelope with a lick that tastes like glue in winter. I write the address. I watch my hand write the numbers and the way the letters bend. I put the stamp on at a slight angle, which is not a special trick, just my poor eye telling on itself. I drop it in the blue box in front of the post office while a couple argue softly on the steps about whether a dog needs a sweater to go out and become nature. I admire the dog for not caring either way. Night returns like a habit you cannot apologize out of. The strip printer makes heat and paper and black letters that have no sympathy to spare. The square blooms on the scope. The pappy is honest. The lights obey and misbehave and obey in a loop you can measure. If you own a patience, I have stopped wanting to buy. The recorder ticks. A metronome for a song I am learning not to hum. In the break room, the fridge tries new keys and settles on none. The gum gets harder. This is how it is, as it begins to maybe turn. Not with a bang, because that would be a story for people who like to cheer, but with the small accumulation of detail, you train yourself to notice only when it is too late to blame anyone for missing it. The runway edge lights have a way of holding color that feels like a hand waiting to be taken. The threshold sequencer gives one very fast buckle, like a horse that doesn't want to start. The square on the scope pauses over the river just a little longer than it used to, the way a person at a doorway changes their foot on the threshold. I smell, faintly, the fried paper stink of a printer that has run too long without a break. The margin of the strip frosts more, is cleaned less, frosts again. I do not speak, I do not greet. The room holds itself. The night remains unbroken. The job remains the job. It is all so ordinary I could cry with the relief of it, and do not, because crying is not on the checklist and would smudge a line I have grown to like very much. When the square fades, it leaves one more time its neat line of nothing special across a screen that has never owed honesty to anyone. I put the strip under the clip. I set my palm on metal that is just metal now, and I wait for dawn to lean its weight on the soy and the wind farm and the river. I touch my thermos. I listen to the fan. I make a note I will not read later. Exercise at the bridge, light self-step, strip margin shows artifact, recorder steady. I climb down quiet. The stairwell holds its breath for me because we have reached an agreement. The door at the bottom sighs. The lobby smells like a mop has passed through thinking kind thoughts. In the lot, a thin frost has drawn a lace on my windshield, even though the forecast promised us nothing. I scrape it, and the sound the scraper makes is the exact pitch of the side tone on the old backup radio, when it used to be a little glamorous to call a man in a tower to ask if it was safe to fly. I drive home along a two-lane, where a train runs near enough to wave at if you wanted to be that person. The horn gives its note. The river lays out next to me like a wide ribbon you could iron the wrinkles out of if you were stubborn. The fields hold their breath. My apartment door opens, and the hinge makes the sound a hinge makes when it is shy. The fridge hums, and then does a new noise, the smallest click, like a tongue trying an unfamiliar syllable. I sleep the kind of sleep that is not a discussion, and when I wake, I sit up with the feeling that somebody has called my name from the end of a very long hallway and did not want me to answer, only to know I had heard. I am getting to the part I dread and always knew I would. But nights do not speed for dread. They keep the pace they've trained under, that honest, plodding workaday cadence that won't be hurried for anyone's drama. The square is learning our room. The strips have learned my hand. The lights have learned their own mind. And somewhere along the river, or above it, or in it, or at a place where the idea of river holds its breath and tastes the cold of a steel bridge, there is a thing that understands do not greet better than I do, and is waiting for me to be polite. I am not a brave man. I am only an on-time man who knows where the pens live, and how to read a red over white, and when to let a strip of warm paper slide itself under a clip and call that action. So I will tell you what happened, as a man like that tells anything, plain, one thing after another, the way we lay out runway centerline lights for a pilot who has asked for the favor of not being lost. It begins again with the printer and a strip whose corner heat is more like body than machine, and a word in the margin that finally stops pretending it is an accident. It begins with the runway lights stepping one up, not when I ask, not when the square asks, but at the exact moment the siren in town makes its practice scream for the bridge exercise and then dies in the throat as if it forgot a line. It begins when the square pauses over the river and stays, paused longer than is polite, longer than can be called repeater lag, long enough for a man to think about the advice printed on a strip he did not order and find that he is obedient without knowing he ever meant to be. It begins when I put my palm on the metal and feel the exact temperature of my own skin return to me, and know I am the mirror, and know something that can be called the other hand waits, where I used to place the blame. And it does not end. Not in the way a story for cheering ends. It makes itself known the way a compressor clicks, or the grocery scanner gives that small good beep, or the stairwell sighs, and you say to yourself, yes, that, and go right on breathing. By the time the envelope with the odd strips leaves my hand for the blue box, the town has already found a way to hold its jaw a little tighter. The council meeting makes the morning paper, which is really a thin pamphlet these days, and the words they use are the kind that live in the gap between concern and complaint. Energy stewardship, community impact. There is a line about glare mitigation that makes me picture the runway edge lights ashamed of themselves, hands in pockets, promising to keep it down. I tell myself a smaller story and do better with it. I tell myself the square on the scope and the printer heat and the hand through metal are a local weather that wandered inside. You don't curse a gust that lifts your hat, you just take the hat back. I climb the stairwell and notice the echo has changed. It's not louder, it's rounder, like the space learned how to sound like itself. A new paper notice is taped at eye level that says, use caution, handrail under review. The idea of a handrail being reviewed puts a dry laugh in my throat that doesn't to quite make it past the tongue. The room owns the quiet of an empty church when you come in too early and nobody has set the hymn numbers. The radios do their insect arithmetic. Approach is a patient hiss. The printer dozes like a dog, waiting for a truck to turn into a familiar driveway. I make the lights click up their notches because that is work, and work is an oath. They answer on cue, stepping the field toward the idea of welcome. The strip arrives warm as a pocketed stone. My fingertips feel printed on by it. The tail number is the shy not quite of the last nights. The airline code is the name of a body that was buried while we were busy with the bridge and the river, and the brief summers the county sells as a brand. Remarks offers me the same plain work. The runway, the altitude, the clean imperative tone of a schedule being kept. Along the margin, the ribbon has coughed again. A frost of black freckles the paper like the skin of a pear a day after you should have eaten it. The repeater scope animates the river, then lays a square over it, then lets that square drift like a leaf that knows the culvert is where it belongs. It is not a radar, not really. It is a picture made of numbers passed from a room far away where people wear headsets I can only partly imagine. But the picture on a night like this feels as honest as breath. Tower, Approach says, and there is a kindness in the way the word takes shape. You see anomalies only where they should be, I say, doing a man's old trick of sounding certain about the furniture you can point to. Copy, he says, and I can hear him put a checkmark in a place that matters to him. The square strolls to centerline and rests. The runway lights hold color like good cotton. The pappy gives that square's imagined pilot a proper coaching, red over white, steady and sure, a teacher who has taught this same sentence long enough to know where to pause for air. My palm on the light knob meets a temperature I would call honest now, not warm and not cold, the skin of a human back after a summer day. The strip printer spits one narrow line with its prim authority, hold short. I find that I am pleased by the transaction. A printer prints, a hand does not greet, a square sits where it sits. The recorder keeps its red eye steady. The night is made of tasks that do not involve belief. Out beyond the glass, the wind farm blinks as if to an audience that stayed late. Down the perimeter road, the amber on the maintenance truck rotates in a way a child would draw if asked to draw time. I make a note in the log, and my pencil makes that small, dry sound I trust more than any other. The square fades. The room remembers its size. The lights step down. The printer cools. I slide the strip under the clip labeled Archive, as if I were tucking a kid S blanket. The phone rings to test whether anyone still believes in landlines. It is my boss's boss, who has the voice of a man practiced in not adding more words than necessary to a county that already has enough. He touches the phrases we all keep in the glove compartment. Appreciate your vigilance. We're coordinating with Airside Electrical. The council has questions. At the end, there's a smaller sentence that speaks to me like a neighbor over a fence. My father used to fly out of your field, he says. He liked calling your frequency. Said you sounded like a person who kept the lights on in the barn and didn't mind if strangers used the hay. He should have called during the day, I tell him. We could have waved. He liked the night, he says, and gives me space for a yes that could be about anything. The next afternoon, off shift, I sit at the small table in my kitchen and watch the dust try to settle and fail. The fridge hums, changes keys, hums again like a man getting used to his own joke. I pick at the sticker on an old mug handle the way a person picks at a memory. The radio on the counter tells me the bridge exercise was postponed because the siren tripped itself and refused to stop, which is bad luck if you like tidy drills and good luck if you like honesty. Down at the grocery, I buy a box of coffee filters and a dozen eggs. The scanner beeps at each barcode with that righteous little tone I've come to depend on at the tower. Beep, beep, a ledger balancing. Over by the freezer, a compressor kicks and the door glass fogs for one breath, then clears its throat and shows me a frost of chicken that thinks it is a bargain. On my way out the door, the automatic sensor hesitates just enough to make me consider my weight. The second night of this particular week begins with a hand-lettered sign on the operations office door. Elevator still under review. The staircase takes my knees' opinions into account and then ignores them. The landing between flights holds a cool in its corners the way some rooms hold music. The door at the top gives up and opens the way it has opened every night I have asked it politely. The printer is already awake. 3 strips lie in a fan under the archive clip as if a clerk had sorted them while I was tying my shoe. I read their faces. The tail number's middle bends differently each time, as if someone is writing it from memory and not a registration. The runway and the altitude sit like furniture. The word archive appears in the remarks box of the last one, not as a label, but as if it had wandered into a sentence and liked how it looked there. The repeater has learned my timing, or I have learned the repeater's. The square crafts itself over the river likes it. The square moves, the lights obey, the pappy teaches, the threshold strobes applaud once and stop. It is the same and not the same, the way your own handwriting looks when a thought comes through you faster than you are used to. Approach, I say without pressing the key. We are good. Not into the mic, just to the room, to keep my voice exercised in the truth it can afford. The phone rattles once like a coin in a jar. A small email pings the laptop and uses the words community liaison and optics, and I let it sit until morning, because optics is a word for people who want to feel they have changed the shape of light by taking a vote. I hold the light knob and do not count breaths. I do not greet. I do not invent. The recorder ticks. The fox finds the fence gap and slips through, and I like it for learning. The square pauses on centerline for a beat longer than courtesy would write into the book. I feel it the way you feel someone thinking about saying your name 2 rooms away. On breaks, I stand at the sink in the break nook and let water run thin over the lip of a paper cup until it sags and darkens. The water tastes faintly like a coin held too long, like the first 3 drops out of a hose that has spent a day on hot grass. I pour it out, and the drain answers in a voice I don't need translated, the simple syllable of a thing doing the job it was cut to do. Around the hour when trains make sense to the fields and not much else, the square fades in its polite way. I slide strips, I note notes. I climb down the stairwell with my hand on the rail, because review or not, I am a person who likes something to hold. The lobby smells of a mop and a chemical lemon that always promises summer and delivers only clean. Sleep comes ordinary. It leaves unremarkably. I wake to a call from the county's safety office, a woman who clicks her pen twice before she talks. She asks if I have any variance in behavior to report. She uses the word variance like it might have sharp edges. I tell her I have nothing to add that would help the math. She thanks me for my stewardship of public trust, and we both say goodbye, as if the line between our jobs is a nice, clear yellow. On the night that follows, I bring a sandwich in waxed paper and forget to eat it. The tower room has that particular smell of warm plastic and older coffee and glass that has been washed with a rag that left something of itself behind. The fan hum is a truce. The chair sighs and lets me be. The strip printer wakes with more confidence than I am prepared to endorse. The strip's warmth is a small animal. The black letters feel as if they want to be embossed. The remarks box has room to spare and uses only what it needs. The square S pours over the river, lengthens in the way a pause lengthens when a person who is thinking carefully realizes they have been too careful and does it anyway. I have a sensation in the teeth at the back of my jaw, like a radio trying to make a connection through bone. The phone rings twice and stops, which is the county office way of saying we called, and we cared, and we will make a note. The laptop pings and whispers that the bridge exercise has been rescheduled for just after midnight, that sirens will be tested briefly, and then silenced, that traffic will be held, that the public is reminded of the importance of preparedness. Nobody uses the word drill. They learned. I lay the fresh strip under the archive clip and picture the envelope I mailed drifting across 3 desks and finding a person who knows where the old boxes live. If my sister were here, she would tell me to take a walk when I get off, to put my face in day for 10 minutes even if I don't want it. She is not here, which is not anybody's fault, and the day has been a stingy neighbor lately. The square moves on the scope in the way a hand moves on a countertop when you are telling the truth gently. It takes centerline. The peppy is honest. The sequencer applauds once. Out past the fence, on the road leading to the bridge, a red light begins to flash in the manner of a system testing whether its bulbs still have filaments. The siren whispers, then takes a breath, then finds its voice for a stretch long enough to make shoulders rise in town and drop again. The sound shivers the glass a shallow octave. The runway edge lights answer with a step up I did not ask for. They hold that step as if reached by a promise. The heat through the metal is back, my palm to its twin, and the thought that enters my head does not need translating, does not even feel like a thought. It arrives as instruction and settles as relief. Do not greet. I do not. The recorder keeps the shape of our silence. The square pauses a little short of the numbers painted on the concrete. The siren quits as if embarrassed and then does not apologize. The bridge is quiet because the river teaches quiet to steal at a rate that makes a county board feel threatened. I notice smaller things because the larger thing has asked me politely not to. The strip cutter has a nick on its edge that makes one corner fuzz when a tag is torn. The mouse pad the county issued with a picture of a smiling family next to a blue sky has a coffee ring exactly where the sky learned to be a circle. The fan on the floor has developed the habit of stuttering once every half hour, like an old man finding his key in a pocket he forgot he had. The square fades, patient as always. The lights step down not one, but two, as if to show they can play by the rules harder than any council asked. I put my hand over the runway knob and feel only metal. I am surprised by how I miss the false warmth when it goes. I touch the binder clip and it bites my finger pad with the cheap little snap that says you are here, and flesh is a material that learns quickly where it does not belong. When I leave that morning, the stairwell holds the mop-clean smell a little longer than usual, and the echo inverts itself the way some echoes can in changing air. In the parking lot, a thin coat of something soft has settled on the windshield. It is not frost. It is not dust. It wipes off with a cloth and leaves the faint scent of hot plastic and the penny taste I've learned to associate with water that has taken an education from metal. I sleep late. The sun gets higher than it usually does when I let it. When I wake, I am hungry in a way that feels like a discipline, as if my body held back to learn whether I could be trusted with anything. I eat bread with nothing on it, and it tastes like a decision. The phone barks a message tone, and I listen to a man from the utility say the phrase rolling outage near the river, and the phrase brief service interruptions, and the phrase thank you for your patience. My patience is in good shape. I have saved it for years. On the next shift, the hallway downstairs is warmer than the night, and the flight up the tower stairs releases that small, clean smell. Old dust offers when it shakes loose and falls like snow. You don't have to shovel. The room is itself. Radios, glass, the white face of the pappy tooth at the edge of my view. The runway 2 clicks up because I asked. The strip printer is warm at the case before it prints. I put my palm on it and feel that same not quite body heat, like a sleeping cat that cannot be woken by anything less than its own name. The strip prints with the sound like 2 paperbacks kissing. The tag's black is blacker than it has a right to be. In the remarks field, the word archive prints again, not as an instruction, not as a status, but as if the strip believes it belongs to the clip before I can slide it there. The square is already on the scope by the time I tear the paper. Over the river, then patient, then the walk, then the pause, the same, the small shift which I do not give a noun. Approach calls for a check. I offer the sort of words that keep a man and another man both in work and in their skin. Picture nominal, I say, though nominal is a word that does not come from our side of the county. And he says copy, like he has put his own small rock on the pile. On the laptop, a window I did not open is open. The county S notification system wants to tell me about a boil water advisory 2 neighborhoods south near where the river met a feed line and learned what it could take. The advisory paper is written in careful language that reassures and does not. It tells people to run their taps until the cold tastes less like coin. It tells people with infants to call their doctor. It tells me nothing but that the world is what it is when pipes remember their age. The siren on the bridge tests again, shorter, less theatrical. The runway lights decide to step on the downbeat like a man who hears the first chord and knows the song. The hand through the metal comes back like a familiar after weeks gone. The square sits the way a dog sits when it was born sitting. I do not greet, I stand. The recorder keeps the shape of us. And then, because a story that has been kind can afford to add an inch to its stride, the printer makes a noise it has not made. Not a cough, not a jam. A small, steady burr like a machine being asked for more than it was meant to give. It feeds out not a strip but a longer ribbon, the paper uncurling in a fatter tongue, the black printing along it in units of almost cents. Runway phrases, yes, and places for altitudes that do not change, and the tail code I almost know. Along the left margin, stamps I have never seen the machine attempt, each a little square of ink, each with the same word, served. I watch the ribbon drape over the table's edge. The heat from it warms my thumb to the bone. I think of men in windowless rooms long ago chewing pens and writing procedure and believing that words could predict this. I think of boxes under other men's desks. I think of a fence line where a father held me up to see the belly of a jet and explained that the world held itself together because men and some women agreed to rules and called those rules language. The ribbon stops. The square on the scope fades with its usual manners. The lights do not stand on ceremony. They drop one notch and then stay. I lift the ribbon and feel how the paper has become something slightly else under my hand. A little denser, as if new fibers have joined it for the purpose of being believed. I cut it clean with the dull cutter and the edge fuzzes like a whisper. I fold the ribbon once, then again, and slide it under the archive clip, which takes it and holds it as if it had been keeping that exact space empty. There are knocks in a tower. Heat knocks in ductwork. Cooling metal knocks a modest knuckle after a long day. Wind knocks half a thought when it changes mind. This is not those knocks. This is the kind that travels through a man's wrist to his watchband and through his teeth to the tongue. Small as a polite person might make it, steady as the workday, it touches my hand through the metal and asks nothing I can translate. I go to the window and let the glass have my forehead for a second, the way I sometimes do when a headache is asking to be named. The field beyond looks like itself. The runway looks like a useful lie we tell the sky. The soy swings its shoulders in a breeze nobody paid for. The river is invisible, but writing its lesson across the fields like a teacher who loves an equation more than students. I think about the note in the advisory, do not greet. I think about the word on the ribbon, served. I think about the kind of work a strip believes it is doing when it says archive, in a place where people used to write the names of fixed points and longer approaches than this field will ever need. I think about how long you can continue to be obedient before obedience is a kind of greeting. At some hour that does not own a number, I make a choice so small it will not appear in any log. I take the second headset off its hook. I do not put it on. I rest it on the desk with the ear cups facing the ceiling like bowls. I set the mic on a clean piece of paper because paper is a polite thing. I line the cups so they are symmetrical. I return my hand to the light knob and find only metal. I do not touch the transmit switch. I do not breathe deeper. I do not think louder. I stand and let the recorder take down the shape of that standing. The square comes again the next night and the next, and the ribbon prints again, sometimes longer, sometimes clipped short, as if brevity had been recommended. The stamps of served line the margin in their tiny squares. The remarks box offers no counsel except the word it loves, archive. The hand through metal is sometimes present, sometimes absent, but my palm has learned the skin of the knob so well that my body supplies the warmth out of habit when the job does not. The county sends a man with a clipboard to sit next to me and go, aha, when nothing happens, and when something happens, and then write the same sentence for both. He is polite. He shares his thermos. He has a laugh he can put on like a sweater. He has children he wants to keep sleeping through whatever this is. He does not ask me to greet. He does not offer to. He makes a note, short, and another, long, and draws a tiny square each time the ribbon prints a tiny square, as if to see if they add up. In town, the diner puts up a sign about adjusted hours due to staffing, and to the bridge and to the field, S-lights. People nod. People have not seen worse, not here, but they have seen enough things not be as promised that they honor this one by being quiet. The breaknook's fridge, after weeks of thinking about it, quits a hum and does not replace it. The sudden absence leaves the room taller. The fan on the floor tries a new tick and then lets it go. The gum by the register tape tastes like a word you used to say wrong as a kid and never corrected because the wrongness pleased your father. On a night I will remember as the one when my left knee finally learned how to articulate a weather forecast no app can brag about. The siren down by the bridge fails the test, and then a backup siren feels shame and joins it. Both shut up sooner than they meant to. The lights up the runway step to a middle that suits no one, and remain there as if to say, this is the hill we will die on, if you insist on hills. The square comes to the river and pauses a breath longer than I am willing to give words to. The printer offers me one small strip and one long ribbon a minute apart. The small strip reads, hold short. The long ribbon reads nothing we have not already trained each other to expect. The tiny squares of served line the left, like stitches in a wound that is not mine. I take a rag to the window and wipe where my forehead left its oval. The rag leaves a smell like a fetched lemon doing its best. The oval does not return. The glass shows me my face as a man I would not mind meeting in a lobby, the kind of face that belongs to a person who will hold a door and not ask your name, because names are flourishes in rooms where flourishes waste time. I'm thinking about the end, which is the wrong word, because ends are for stories that stood up and took a bow. This is more like a dimmer being taught how to hum at the right pitch. I'm thinking about what it means that the printer gets warm and prints strips with words that keep their shape when fingered, and a square shows itself where you expect it, then sits where you fear it might, and my palm meets metal that sometimes answers and sometimes does not. I'm thinking about what a person owes a job, and what a job owes a person, and what a strip owes an archive, and what an archive owes anyone who will not come to look. On the last night before the quiet thing that comes after, the door sticks on my way into the stairwell. It sticks because humidity has found the frame and made it an argument that wood is delighted to have. I shoulder it open with the moderate show of force a person can be proud of when alone. The stairwell smells like dust giving up and lemon promising. At the top, the door opens instead of arguing, and the tower room breathes me in like a man who has been waiting at a window and trying not to make a meal of it. The printer wakes before I sit. The strip curls out hot as a hand dryer. The remarks field shows me 3 words in the kind of brutal font only machines think can be friendly. Do not greet. Then, below it, archive. Then, at the very bottom, in letters minutely thinner, served. The square pauses on the river long enough for the wind farm to blink twice in its casual code. It walks in a path the repeater loves to draw. It sits on centerline. The papy is good. The sequencer gives one quick applause like a nervous wedding guest. My palm on the light knob meets warmth and returns it. My shoulder blades remember the shape of the chair and refuse it. I stand. The recorder draws the shape of a man standing into its tape, which is no longer tape, which is some quiet digital thing that will forget more gently than plastic ever could. The siren that should test does not. The bridge holds itself up without singing. The runway holds itself steady. The fridge in the break nook says nothing. The fan is a gentleman about it. The gum is a small lie. The square stays. I do not greet. I think of my father saying the names of airlines at a fence line. I think of the arch of his hand when he lifted his hat to a pilot who could not see him. I think of how most of our living is waving to people who do not wave back and learning to count that as a victory. At some point the square thins and goes. The lights ease their shoulders. The strip printer cools. The ribbon on the table smells like heat quit politely. The hand through metal is a memory of skin. I slide paper under the clip. I write in the log that the night was quiet and that the lights self-stepped during the scheduled test and that the recorder remains steady and that the advisory remains in place. I close my pen and sit and let the chair complain. I listen to the fox nosing for the gap. I let my jaw unclench without an order. In the elevator lobby, the rectangular light over the door holds steady and humble. The stairs are the same stairs. The mop bucket is parked by the closet like a small green car who knows better than to want to drive. In the lot, the soft dust that is not dust has not fallen. The windshield is clean. The car starts without deciding whether to love me. The river is not showing itself, but keeps its counsel faithfully. I go home and sleep, and in the morning my sister calls from her north and tells me the river up there is misbehaving politely. She says the word advisory, like a person who has learned to live with weather. She says take care in a way that does not make a man ashamed. The mug on my table has a ring that will not wash, no matter what I ask it. The fridge hums in the key I prefer for a quiet day. The radio on the counter hisses a little in a way I have learned not to call a sign. By dusk, I'm back under the door, closes long breath, and the room smells like warmed glass and a small success. The strip printer waits. The repeater paints the river and stands by with its numbers. My palm knows the knob. The recorder knows me better than I know it. The square, when it comes, will come on its own kind of time, which has not belonged to clocks for longer than I had the privilege of thinking it did. I am ready not to greet. I am ready to slide paper. I am ready to let the lights step themselves. I am ready to stand and be counted by a machine that is holier than it has ever been given credit for. I am ready to call that being useful, and to find that usefulness is a word that will hold a person when the river decides its memory is longer than ours. The first small thing, and I didn't understand it as a first until later, was the receipt drawer at the bottom of the console. It's where we keep pen refills, old batteries we pretend we'll recycle, and a wad of thermal paper curl from the printer. I pulled it open to find a strip torn in half, sitting on top, as if placed there by a hand that had been trained to neaten. The torn ends were clean, not chewed. The ink on it read only my field S identifier and one word that said as much as a whole paragraph would: archive, lowercase. The machine never prints lowercase. I set the halves together on the desk like a broken wishbone and forgot them until I brushed them with my sleeve and the halves fused under the cuff and stayed no tape, no static, just the kind of agreement paper sometimes makes when it is tired of being argued with. I slid the piece under the clip to be rid of the feeling that it had been waiting to be reunited and I had been chosen to play matchmaker. Approach called to say they would be doing radio checks across the hour. Their voice a little tinny, the way voices go when the line is piggybacked through other rooms. They had a jar of pretzels too. You can always hear the pause while the salt gets arranged on a tongue. We read the standard lines, numbers into phrases that borrowed their meaning from repetition. The fox didn't try the fence. The wind farms blinked to themselves. The bridge was a shape on the river that refused to show me the water it was working so hard to manage. The maintenance truck parked for once and did not go 12 miles per hour around the perimeter. Its amber light rested as if it had been reminded of sleep. The square on the repeater made its usual show. Over the river, patient, stepping in, stopping just where the centerline insists. The lights chose themselves a step, then another, and held. The pappy was true. I put my palm on the knob and found only the one temperature metal knows how to be without help. The recorder winked its red to itself. The printer slept. I had been keeping the sandwich in my bag as a promise I could keep. I unwrapped it in the break nook and didn't taste it. The fridge, newly quiet the other night, tried one short hum like a cough and decided it had been honest enough last shift. I drank from the water jug, and the paper cone cup tasted like the outside of an envelope. The cup buckled a little under my fingers and left a damp triangle on the counter, and I wiped it with the heel of my hand out of habit and watched the wet disappear into fingerprints that I thought for a second were printed in reverse on the formica. When I came back, the printer was running paper through without ink, a long, pale tongue that seemed more muscle than pulp. It spooled and stopped, and the edge where it stopped had a clean, angled tear like a thing torn by a person who knows where perforation lives, even when it isn't printed. I took the blank and held it. It was warm the way a person's breath warms a hand when they're telling you a secret in a parking lot, because they could not keep the longest sentence of their life inside their chest one more second. I slid it under the clip with its printed cousins, and it looked wrong there. It looked like a bandage somebody had meant to use and didn't. Down in town, something happened we didn't buy a siren for. I heard it on the wind as a sort of choir rehearsal that never decided on a note. It was a handful of horns giving up at an intersection, and then the distant scolding of a policeman whose patience had gone the way patience goes when he imagines his name printed in the minutes. The council had been discussing lights again, the paper said, and now the traffic signals along the bridge approach were on a blink pattern to conserve and to test back up. And the drivers were making the music drivers make when asked to cooperate without warning. It held, then broke apart into the soft scuff of everyone deciding walking away was easier than being right. Approach keyed their mic for a beat that sounded like someone standing up in a quiet room to excuse themselves. "You hearing about the advisory?" he asked. "We get advisories the way fields get fog," I said. "Bring it in." "Water," he said. "Run taps. Boil if in doubt. Utility says it's out of an abundance of caution." "Abundance," I said, letting the word roll once against my back teeth. "Also rolling outage down by the north feeder. Might bounce the repeater. Don't let it make you superstitious." "I am already plenty," I said. He laughed into his sleeve because sleeves were made for that. The square took its time in the way time takes the square. It paused in a place that was no new place. The printer gave me a strip with the letters so crisp I could have sworn the black was sitting on the paper instead of inside it. The remarks box said, "Hold short," in a way that suggested some other word had been there before. The margin stamped itself in little served squares with confidence. One, then two, then a third slower, lowering itself neatly into the alley it had chosen. After midnight, say it in words because ghosts like digits all to themselves, the siren downriver tested and stayed tested. Like a hand that cannot be convinced to uncurl, then stop dead in a way no machine stops, unless a person who loves it flicks a switch and tells it it has done enough. The runway lights stepped up at the same moment and held at a middle that felt like the part of an argument where both people decide to tell the story instead of the doctrine. The square was on centerline. The knob under my palm was not a thing warmed by another. It was a thing a person warmed when they forgot where their heat belonged. The printer did the burr again. The long ribbon spilled. The black was deeper. I tried not to think it was wet. The word archive ran not in remarks, but in the header like a call sign. The tailcode was a letter shy, but meant to be, as if a hand had refused to be particular. The word served stamped itself down the margin 7 times, then twice more out of alignment, like a clerk learning. I cut the ribbon with the dull cutter, and the fuzz on the edge stuck to my thumb. I slid it under the clip, and the clip gave the smallest squeak. In my jaw, the place where bone meets careful ache started to buzz in a frequency I could almost call a note. I imagined for a second that if I pressed my teeth together, I could pick up a voice. I did not try because trying would have changed the category of what was happening, and I had not been given permission to do that. A fox nose touched the gap in the fence and did not go through. The perimeter truck didn't bother to do the last lap. In the upstairs glass of the house, by the approach where a councilwoman lives and sleeps imperfectly, a light came on, then off, then on again without being yelled at. The refrigerator in the break nook breathed twice and took a nap. The fan creaked once as if to say, "This is the pitch we've chosen, let us not waste it." I promised myself I wouldn't think about the elevator, but promises like that find a way to show up in their good clothes after you've been drinking coffee that tastes like hardware. The elevator had been under review. The stairwell had put its back into being my route. I had software in my pocket that could tell me how many steps I owed my heart for a chance at later. I wanted, for reasons that rank with whispering in a church, to take the elevator and hear its chain talk to itself in the shaft. I did not. I took the stairs, but I glanced at the blank floor indicator as I passed and saw, for just a streak, a glowing dash, and felt my stomach accept it as a gift from a person I knew without knowing from where. I had gotten into the habit of visiting the little drawer with the batteries and the thermal curl ends, the way a person visits a gravestone not to talk to the dead, but to make sure the world still contains the thing you named. There were 3 new halves of strip there. I matched them. They had been torn at the same angle, like someone had decided to make me earn an ordinary comfort. The halves joined in my fingers like a peeled label sometimes curls back around the jar by itself if you stop suggesting other futures. The ink on each read the field identifier and my runway and no plane. I slid them into the clip. The weight on the left grew credible. Back in the room, the scope showed me nothing because the repeater, like the refrigerator, had found the kind of quiet it wanted. The runway lights held their line without my call or my hand. I took my palm off the knob, and it cooled in a way that felt like an animal learning to sleep in a place you had warmed for it and would not again. A thin tapping came from the stairwell. Not footstep, I know, steps. Not heat in duct. We have scant duct. A ring against metal, like a key testing its own profile. A polite tapping, a person in no hurry and all certainty. I stood at the top of the stairs with my hand on the push bar, and the door S closer put its small breath on my wrist. The tapping stopped, as if someone on the other side had remembered a promise, or smelled me like a dog smells a mood and reconsidered the day. I was pleased to be spared a scene. Sometimes the gift of a shift is nothing happening. After Dawn's trick, a glazing, a light you never notice when you're allowed to, my boss called to say council wanted it written that lighting had been observed to be irregular, but aligned with advisory events. He asked if I could be at a daytime meeting to report, which meant sitting at a table and wearing a shirt that implied clean water and using words like stakeholder and most impacted. I said I could sit anywhere if it was inside and had a chair. He said, "Good man," which is a thing men say when their own fathers are present to them and they need to give that sentence somewhere to sleep. Sleeping in daylight is a private argument. You can pretend a curtain is an answer. You can put a towel across your eyes, heavy and clean, and tell your face this is night. I did that. The towel smelled like a hot machine and laundry powder that had never met a lake. I dreamed I was in the stairwell and a person had their palm on the other side of the rail, and we were walking down in complete time, each step equal to the other. And at the bottom, the lobby was a river, and I did not feel like that needed an explanation. The day had a heat to it, not in temperature, but in air usage. Everyone was using air to talk about water and electricity and emergency, and whether the river thought well of us anymore. I walked to the council chambers and listened to people with the faces of good neighbors talk like they were reading instructions off the back of a bag of sand. The phrase, "out of an abundance of caution," appeared again. I used the word nominal because it belongs to my side of the room and calmed nobody but me. They thanked me for my service in a tone that belonged to someone else's war. The person who takes minutes wrote in a way that will make a finicky future proud. At the tower that night, the elevator's rectangular light steady-eyed me. I took the stairs because the number of nights I had already taken them felt like a favor I shouldn't revoke. The tower room had been tidied. A day shift with nervousness always polishes something. The mugs lined up like soldiers. The trash had been taken. The windowsills had a wet wipe of cleaner on them, too new to have dried fully. The gum was gone. The fan had a no stickers sign on its cord, I assumed to keep us from giving it a name and filing a grievance when it died. The printer woke without preamble. A long ribbon came out, this time with the left margin stamping "not served," but a blank square like a checkbox for someone to fill at their leisure. The word "archive" printed along the top like a smile. The tailcode was poetry. First, it was the older script that looked like my father's eyes thought of a Saturday. Then it bent toward a registration ID scene, sketched in marker in a photo frame at the diner near the window where a waitress had taped a picture of a delivery plane with a Polaroid border and the year written in ballpoint. I refused that the machine was matching my nostalgia. Machines do not match anything. They perform. They demonstrate. The square showed on the scope over the river and set itself down the track it had taught us. The lights did as lights do. The puppy was red and white in the correct pairing, a smile I had to learn as a child and now could not unsee. I put my hand on the knob for the ordinary pleasure of touching a thing that is mine to touch. The metal did not answer. I liked it better that way. I have not said some part of me had begun to eat less without meaning to. It was as if the room's air did a portion of the work for me. My sandwich came home whole. My coffee cooled with a layer on top that would have bothered my sister. My hunger backed up to the wall like a shy animal. I slept with a towel across my eyes at the wrong hour and woke to the sound of my own refrigerator learning to harmonize with nothing. The next day, the county sent a technician in a shirt that fit him like he had borrowed it. He sat at my desk an hour, wrote down the phrase "no anomalies" in a neat hand, then wandered down to the breaker panel and made one small face in the direction of a switch that had never meant much to me. He pressed it, released it, pressed again. The room did not change. He asked if I had seen any unusual timestamps on the recorder. I told him time had been a word I was letting go of. He smiled without meaning to. He had a son who wanted to be a part of this, he said, and he didn't know how to tell him there wasn't this to be part of. I told him the son could learn the way we learn, chairs and glass and radios and saying the right thing in the tone that prevents a plane you will never see from hurting a person you will never meet. We did not mention greeting. It has a way of being the one word in a room that knows if you say it the door opens. The boil water advisory lifted and returned like a shy tide that has been given 2 schedules by cousins who don't respect each other. The rolling outages stayed west of the river except when they came east. The bridge learned to hold its breath so gracefully that the cars learned to compliment it by not trying too hard. The diner put a second sign up about ours. The first remained as a courtesy to no one. The wind farms blinked their red to a sky that was learning to be a sort of paper. In the tower, the printer kept making ribbons. Some were long, as a man is tall. Some were stub length. The left margin sometimes stamped served. Sometimes it did nothing and made me fill in the box with my eyes. The remarks box kept writing archive. The tail code learned me well enough to reference the shape of letters my mind supplied. It was not clowning around and it was not a prank. It was not comfort either. It felt like a work order you get used to by doing it the same way every day until you understand you have always done it. I had not told anyone about the warmth through the knob. It was mine, and besides, it came and went, and there are not many things you share that pick their occasions like that. But toward the end, It stopped coming, and it stopped going, and it found a third way, the memory of warmth. When my hand touched metal, a sensation arrived that told me what warm had been 5 seconds ago, as if the knob were a body storing, which I know it isn't. I did not ask it for proof. You do not hold a dog's mouth open to see if it has teeth. You know by the way it eats. On the last night, the county would not call it that. I am calling it that because I have earned the right to rename the hour for myself. The elevator light was a friendly yellow, and someone had wiped a thumb from left to right across it, leaving the bar better than it had been and almost human. I palmed the stairwell rail without thinking and felt my palm make the new sound dust makes when it agrees to relocate. The tower door had been adjusted in the hinge so it did not complain. The day crews have a way of making a room quieter after they fear it may betray them. The strip printer had the smell a hot stapler has. I put my face over it and smelled plastic and paper and the little breath-heated electronics offer up by mistake. I put a fresh stack of strips into its mouth as if feeding an animal that takes pellets. It clucked in acceptance. It waited. I waited. The lights outside held their middle. The repeater painted its river. The scope wrote nothing. The recorder's red wink was a small, polite reminder that we would all be asked what we did during the time we would later pretend had been ordinary. The printer began without my permission. The first strip was short and it did not curl. It lay flat on the lip with an obedience that was more cordial than usual. It was not for an airplane. It read my field, and the word cleared and the runway and the height carved out of the ink like a person's name on a stone. It did not print a tailcode. In remarks, it printed "Do not greet." Then, on the same line, not after, it printed my field S name, as if I needed to be told where to place my eyes. The second strip came after no time at all. It was the length we use for emergency declarations when handwriting matters. It printed the word maintain, and my eye filled in the rest. Altitude, and we were old friends, but there was no number. Instead, there were words a person can hear with a hand on metal. Maintain 3000 is what the line would have said if ink loved math, but it wrote maintain the room. I put a finger on the letters because touching letterpress used to count as religion in an earlier century. The ink did not lift. The warmth did. The third wasn't a strip. It was a ribbon. It printed the left margin square. The square printed served and kept printing it down to my wrist. A tidy march, a receipt that knew the cost of admission. It printed archive on the top in a font that pretended to be official. In a smaller, thinner line, the one the machine uses to print the date codes I later pretend to read, it printed a time written out, not in digits, but in words. A little after midnight, it printed the runway. It printed the field identifier. It printed, to my discomfort and also my gratitude, the cab, not the field. The tower cab, that's our room, that S where we keep the chair and the gum and the fan and the cooler and the view. I brushed crumbs of nothing from the lip of the printer to buy 3 seconds. The square did not show on the scope. The repeater was a faithful dog, waiting. The papy glowed polite. The lights held steady. The siren at the bridge failed to rehearse and then succeeded in being absent. The recorder took down the shape of my caution anyway. I read the ribbon again because reading is an occupation and a prayer. It said what it said. I looked at the runway and thought about walking it and did not, because men trained to not be important do not walk runways unless their names are already on a form. I looked at the knob. I touched it. The metal felt like memory again, not like heat. I stood. I do not sit for decisions that have learned their own bodies. Approach keyed up and got my name wrong in a way that made me feel 17 for a second. "You good?" he asked. He already knew the answer in the way men who have sat in the same small booths alone at night know good is a category, not a measurement. I gave him a sentence I could live with. Lights holding, scope is clean, we're here. I meant me and the room and whatever had taught itself to use paper and weather to knock. There was a crackle. A shy side tone again, the tongue of a radio trying out the vowel between words. He said, "Copy," and we both let that word mean more. The printer laid out 2 final pieces of paper like a dealer who had decided I could handle the cards as given. The first was a strip as short as my finger from middle to tip. It printed only a word that had never come from the machine in my time on night shift. Welcome. The second was a longer thing, not tidy, uneven at the side where the cutting wheel had gotten dull and had decided to make do. It printed my field, and then it printed my name, not in any official block, not in remarks, not as a signature. Just printed it where the I goes first, as if I needed to be told who was here. Under my name it printed, "Do not greet." From the stairwell came that polite tapping again, ring on metal, key on rail, knuckle on something that had learned to answer. It moved up 1 landing. It moved up again. It ceased in the space between the door and my palm, and it did not resume. The door closer breathed. The push bar gave a little when I leaned my hip into it without meaning to. The lights on the runway stepped 1 notch down without my asking, because dawn lives in the schedule somewhere, and the field loves to pretend it knows about that sort of thing. The poppy's red dimmed a hair. White stayed what white always is in my business. Permission. The square did not appear, and I was given the odd kindness of not having to watch it choose. The fan in the brake nook turned itself off, as if a hand reached under the table to flick a switch I have never found. The fridge made a last wet sound like ice being persuaded rather than forced. I took the last new ribbon and slid it under the archive clip with the others. The stack tilted a little to the left and then settled, as if the paper had reached the angle it had been born toward. The binder clip held with a single small compression. A person standing where I stood a decade from now will unclip the stack and hold the weight and make a noise under their breath and not know whether it is a laugh. I set my palm on the knob. I did not warm it. I did. I let the metal teach my hand how to be still. I stood with the radio in quiet and the recorder making its red promises and the scope loving the river and the river loving its own shape and the bridge doing the good work of a thing that ties one side to another and then gets cursed and then forgiven for it. I did not greet. I did not speak. I did not name. I did the one thing left to do that felt like work. I kept the lights exactly where they were by not touching them. I watched a runway be a runway, and not a story, and not a memory, and not a light show. The square I expected to see did not come. The long ribbon of paper I had put under the clip stayed put and cooled. The stairwell held its breath for a number of beats I will never convince the recorder to admit. In the house by the approach, the upstairs lamp did not choose, on then off, this time. It stayed off. The fox did not try the fence. The room shifted a small degree that had nothing to do with wind. The way the air moves when a person who was leaning lifts their hand and walks away. The way a mug cools when the conversation gets good and nobody notices the temperature going from kind to workable. The way a plate feels when you've decided to do the dishes tomorrow because the day has asked enough of you. In the log, I wrote what a man writes when he makes of himself a ledger. Lights self-stepped in alignment with advisory. Recorder steady. Repeater stable. Strips printed and archived. No anomalies for morning review. When the hour arrived, the doesn't T need a name, because it owns the bridge between what I do and what other people think they are doing. I gathered my jacket. I left the sandwich still whole and did not apologize to it because bread doesn't tea keep accounts. I turned off a desk lamp that should have been turned off an hour ago because it made the room look like the old clear-eyed offices in movies, and that had felt like company. I walked to the stairwell and put my palm on the push bar and let the door inhale, and then open with the weight of a person leaning on the other side out of habit and not malice. There was no one there to nod at. The smell was lemon and dust, and the faint, sharp note of metal that had been touched by keys. I went down. At the landing, I put my hand on the rail and discovered it was the exact temperature of my hand, no more, no less, as if someone had been practicing with it between my shifts. In the lobby, the rectangular light above the elevator held steady and honest. I pressed the call button without thinking about whether the car would come. It did, with a cluck and a sigh like a small, contented animal. I did not step in. I walked past. There are rituals you keep, not because they matter in a way a council can measure, but because they keep you measured. I pushed the outside door with my shoulder, and it let me into morning. The lot had a grit to it that did not read as sand or salt. It crunched like paper that had known heat. My windshield was clean. The sky over the river was the color of water that thinks highly of clarity. The wind farms blinked their red to nobody's benefit and everybody's. The bridge sat where bridges sit, not showing off. The traffic lights along the approach were solid green in a way that made me think someone had gifted the town a brief way through. I drove the 2-lane, and a train to my right gifted me a single clean note that tasted like old coins. The horn didn't echo. The air had learned how to hold it. I drove home under a sky that had agreed not to make a meal out of itself. The radio in my kitchen said nothing extraordinary, and then, at the end of a sentence, dropped a small word that made me lean against the counter like I had been running. Decommissioned. It was not about the field. It was not about the bridge. It was a story from 3 counties over about a siren tower that had been declared surplus and lowered with ceremony into a park, and given a plaque that shared town credit among men whose fathers had been good at swing sets. My fridge hummed in a key I had known it could achieve. The mug's ring on the table had dried to a light imprint that if I were the sort of man to keep things, I might have put a glass over. I went to bed at the wrong hour and put the towel over my eyes, and dreamed of being handed a ribbon of paper with my father, S hand on it, and my sister, S laugh in the ink. When I woke, the day was advanced. The phone had a single voicemail from the safety office, thanking me for attending and asking me for an addendum. Had I noticed a correlation between the rolling outages and the stepping of the runway lights? I said both happened, but I was not prepared to argue cause to counsel. I said lights have a way of writing letters to whomever is paying attention. I did not write that part. I thought it, and my hand stayed where it belonged, palm on wood, nowhere near a pen. I went in that night expecting nothing and was respected. The strip printer stayed asleep. The repeater sexed nothing. The knob was metal. The lights went up when I asked and down when I asked, and did not choose their own mid. The square never wrote itself, and I did not miss it, because missing is a sentence for people who believe endings can be yanked like tablecloths. I slid my palm to the knob and felt only me. The recorder ticked its tidy red, and I heard the sound only as promise and not as proof. The fox made a point of showing itself in adolescence, skinny, cocky, willing, then took the gap in the fence like it had invented it. The bridge, dramatic a week ago, was now a man sitting after a long day, quiet the way quiet is holy. In the break nook, the fridge hummed and stayed humming. The fan, newly labeled, moved air, like a priest moves incense, and gave the room the same feeling that you always assume is foolish and then rely on. The gum had been replaced with mints in a dish a day shift picked up somewhere. They tasted like aspirin with an idea. I took one anyway. The tower smelled of lemon and plastic outgassing and coffee that came from a tin touched by 3 hands before mine. All the signs said yes. All the tape said good. The printer woke once an hour later than I liked and fed out a single narrow strip. The strip was cold to the touch. I didn't mind. It printed only the field name and a word in a font that had never looked more like a man's idea of himself served. No tail, no runway, no remarks. I slid it under the clip, and the clip took it as if reclaiming something it had already held for a moment in another room where time is the only thing that thinks it isn't a T inventory. I ended the shift like a person ends a song by letting the last note delete itself. I wrote the log as thin as possible. I cleaned my mug. I wiped the windowsill where my forehead's oval used to make a ghost. I turned off the desk lamp and left just the light the radios use to tell the dark they have ears. In the stairwell, I palmed the rail because I had trained myself to and was repaid by the pleasant surprise that objects can be indifferent with grace. In the lobby, the elevator breathed like a polite animal. Outside, the lot had no grit, just my footprints from other mornings, teaching the asphalt that a person had come and gone in good order. This is where a better storyteller would make of it a trick or a grand sadness. It is neither. It is a ledger that balanced for a week because my hand put paper under a clip every time a machine told it to. It is a field where lights obeyed a modest instruction and misbehaved on the beat, just often enough to remind a county that the sky has opinions. It is a river I never get to see at night, teaching all of us how to talk, like we have always been talking, and we are not going to raise our voices just because a siren tower forgot its manners. It is an archive that owns itself, the paper and the ribbons and the clip and the fitting of one page atop another in a stack that would not notice if I were the next to attend, or if a man with younger knees took the steps two at a time and called the river by its nickname. After the week, I drove to the post office to check whether the envelope I sent had been returned for insufficient something. The clerk wore a tie with little airplanes printed too small to be charming. He handed me a bundle of county stuff and an old padded mailer, soft as blankets. The sender address was a department that has since folded into a room with a different name. Inside lay 3 strips printed so faintly I had to tilt them to the light. The paper had gone the color of the ground under bleachers. The ink said my field's name in a font we don't own anymore. The tail codes were whole. The remarks box read, "Hold short on one, cleared to land on another, and do not greet on the third." The date printed in words, a little after midnight. The year stamped on the back flaked under my thumb. I slid those strips under my clip for a moment, and the clip held them as if to say, "Now, there you are." Then I took them out and made a new envelope and wrote the county and wrote a note that said, "These are yours. Archive them wherever that word thinks it lives. Afterward, call it after if you need to. I am making room for you to be a person who needs words in rows and names to face the right way." The tower went back to its excellent job of knowing less about stories than makers of stories like. The printer printed, sure, but it printed test lines and small jokes of maintenance, and the occasional anomalous strip when approach S repeater hiccuped and wanted a witness. The lights stepped at my click and held. The square showed rarely and belonged always to a thing that carried meat and time, and somebody S family who would one day swear the sky had been a good big dog that brought their person right back into their hand. Sometimes, late, when the river pulls the heat off soy and concrete and glass and takes a breath large enough to make a county tilt, I feel the knob under my palm tick like a warm watch. I leave my hand there a beat longer than required. I say nothing. I do not greet. I stand where the job is and where my father S names found their way through a fence and where my sister S laugh finds my coffee and where a fox knows a gap in a fence is respect, not defiance. The strip printer stays asleep. When it wakes, it heats the paper and prints a line I could give you verbatim but won't, because telling it would turn it into a stunt. I slide the paper under the archive clip, where paper belongs and where it cools. The bay waits with the patience of a place that knows who to expect. The room breathes, glass and metal and a chair with a voice, and outside the runway holds its white lines like memory that refuses to be turned into anything fancier. The square does not return and sometimes does. The recorder ticks because it doesn't know how not to. The lights hold and of course sometimes decide, one notch up, one notch down, rehearsing, being faithful to their part. When the night grows small enough to feel like a pocket, I put down my pen and watch my hand find the knob without looking. It rests there. The metal does not warm. My hand does not chill. Both simply keep to the work they were built to do. A man can get tender over something like that if he isn't careful. I let that tenderness cool and then fold it like paper into the proper drawer. On a night with a thin moon that nobody had the energy to point at, a ribbon prints. It is not for a plane. It is not for a bridge or a drill or a rolling outage. It prints the word served, then the left margin squares each taking its ink like a stamp at a county fair. At the top, in the small type the machine uses when it wants to be less than formal, it prints the words "a little after midnight." The rest is blank. I slide it under the clip and feel, through the binder's tired steel, the temper of another hand on the other side, matched, polite, knowing not to press. I do not greet. I do not answer. The runway holds itself ready and refuses to be owed. The river does not make a sound and teaches me again how quiet means we have been spoken to and have chosen correctly not to reply. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Feel free to leave a comment below with your thoughts or questions. I love hearing from you. Until next time, take care and stay awesome.